The first deal is done. World leaders promise to end deforestation in less than a decade.
We have to stop the devastating loss of our forests that are the lungs of our planet.
Described as a landmark deal at the Global Climate Change Summit in Glasgow, now the question is, can politicians deliver on their promise? Also this lunchtime, two Met police officers admit doctoring and sharing photos of the bodies of two murdered sisters on WhatsApp. Suspend smart motorways, the call from MPs not to build new ones after deaths. And Prince William's Earth shot at Glasgow, the Prince and his climate change campaigners on tour.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Can the world end deforestation by 2030? That is the promise. World leaders in Glasgow have signed their first major agreement to try to limit the rise in global temperatures. Forests play a vital role in absorbing carbon dioxide. When trees are cut down, global temperatures rise. Their pledge is backed by £14 billion worth of investment and covers 85% of the world's forests. The politicians want to reverse deforestation by that deadline too, but is 9 years too far away, and will this plan work where others have failed? Here's Rebecca Barry.
They're known as the lungs of the planet, drawing in carbon dioxide, breathing out oxygen. Yet just recently, ITV News filmed this destruction in Brazil. Deforestation like this contributes to climate change, wiping out trees that absorb the warming greenhouse gas CO2. That's why world leaders have now agreed to protect and restore the Earth's forests. It's the first major deal of COP26. Its host says it's time to end humanity's role as conqueror and become nature's custodian.
We have to stop the devastating loss of our forests, these great teeming ecosystems, trillion-pillared cathedrals of nature, 3 trillion-pillared cathedrals of nature that are the lungs of our planet.
World leaders have pledged to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. 110 leaders have signed up to the agreement, including the UK, the US, China and Brazil, covering 85% of the world's forests. The pledges have been backed by almost £14 billion worth of public funding and private investment.
I am happy to be here today as an Indigenous woman that considers forests and land as home, not as commodities. It took you 25 COPs to understand that Indigenous peoples have known forever our planet is alive.
Brazil is among the signatories. Its forests are often destroyed for agricultural products sold in developing countries like cocoa, palm oil and soy. A recent investigation involving ITV News linked everyday UK dairy products to the destruction of vast areas of Brazilian forest to make cattle feed. Joe Biden insists the United States will lead by example.
I'm confident we can do this. All we need to do is summon the will to do what we know is right and we know is necessary and know is in our capacity. Let's get to work. We can do this, and it'll have a generational impact.
While many have welcomed this historic deal, some say a 10-year target is too slow. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
So just how bad is the problem? Well, according to the World Wildlife Fund for Nature, in the time it takes you to say the word deforestation, a football pitch-sized patch of forest is being destroyed. Around 10% of global warming is caused by forest damage. Up to 15 billion trees are being cut down every year across the world. And one of the most extreme examples of deforestation is in the Amazon rainforest in South America. Between August of last year and this July, more than 10,000 square kilometres of the rainforest there was lost to deforestation. To put that into perspective, that's an area almost 7 times bigger than Greater London or half of Wales. Let's join our political editor, Robert Peston, who's in Glasgow for us. Some big promises then today on forests, on deforestation and also on methane emissions.
Yeah, there's an enormous amount going on today. And if we just start with that hugely significant pledge to stop deforestation and indeed to expand forests by 2030. We have heard these ambitions before. I think what's different this time is that there is 14 billion pounds of government and private sector money going into trying to preserve the forest, and that's terribly important because of course some governments and lots of businesses make money out of wiping out these forests, and so they do need to be compensated. And that's a huge theme at the moment, which is, how much money is the rich West going to give to help developing countries and poorer countries not only make the transition to a greener economy, but also to protect themselves from the already damaging effects of the global warming that we are suffering from right now. And when you talk to the leaders of the poorer countries, almost all of them say it is a moral imperative for countries like ours, which got rich off essentially pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, causing this devastating problem. They say it's a moral obligation on our part to help them. I actually want to read what I thought was probably the best synopsis of this. Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the president of South Africa, wrote this morning in the FT, to be clear, this is not about charity. This is about fairness and mutual benefit. Countries with developed economies carry the greatest responsibility for climate change because they've historically been the biggest polluters. Developing countries are the worst affected. Now, I mentioned South Africa, I mentioned Cyril Ramaphosa because something I mentioned last night is that we are expecting a very symbolically important deal, perhaps even today, where significant sums of money from countries like the UK will go to South Africa to help it reduce its dependence on coal-fired power stations. South Africa is an economy very much driven by coal-fired power, emitting vast amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere, and if it's going to be weaned off that and hit its pledges to become more dependent on renewables, we've got to help.
Show us the money. This conference, this summit is so crucial to all of our futures and also to this government. What is your assessment of how it's going so far?
So Boris Johnson, in a sense, initiated the conference yesterday with a very downbeat message. And it's one actually I've been talking to you about now for weeks, which is this conference cannot on its own limit the rise in temperatures to that 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, which is what scientists say is as near as we can get to a sort of safe level of global warming. What this conference is all about, however, is a series of step-by-step initiatives like the trees one. You mentioned methane before. Methane also terribly important. We are going to get a methane announcement. Reason why limiting methane emissions is so important is because methane is one of those gases that not only does terrible damage in terms of global warming, but actually it evaporates, it can be removed from the atmosphere much faster than CO2. So today's methane announcement also terribly important. What I would say, just in a nutshell, things are going quite well so far, but it's early days. We've got another 10 days to go.
OK, Robert Peston, thank you for that so far. Thank you. On to the day's other main story now, and 2 Metropolitan Police officers have admitted sharing photos of the bodies of 2 murdered sisters on WhatsApp. PC Dennis Jaffa and PC Jamie Lewis breached the police cordon of the crime scene to take inappropriate and unauthorised photos of Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, who were murdered in a London park last year. PC Lewis even superimposed his own face onto one of the photos before sending it to a colleague. Sally Biddulph has the details and the reaction.
Arriving at the Old Bailey earlier today, 47-year-old PC Dennis Jaffa. Inside, just minutes later, he pleaded guilty to committing misconduct in a public office. Next to him in court, 33-year-old PC Jamie Lewis, charged with the same and again pleading guilty. Both men admitted they had taken photos of the bodies of Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, who were killed in a country park in Wembley last year. The sisters had been celebrating Bieber's 46th birthday when they were murdered by Satanist Daniel Hossain, who was sentenced to life imprisonment last week. The two police officers had been sent to guard the cordon around the victims, but instead they took photos and then shared them on WhatsApp. Lewis went as far as superimposing his own head on one of the bodies before sending the image to a colleague. He remained silent as he left the hearing.
Are you going to apologise for what you did?
Outside court today, the women's mother spoke of how the men she refers to as Despicable 1 and Despicable 2 had further deepened their family's pain.
You go to London to start to prepare the funeral of your dead children, and then you're forced to have a meeting with the IOPC and the then commander to tell you that police officers that should have been protecting the area had actually taken selfies.
The police watchdog, the IOPC, which led the criminal investigation into the former police officers, was equally as scathing.
There could be no place in policing for anyone behaving this way. These officers have further undermined public confidence and damaged trust in the Metropolitan Police Service at a time when policing standards have never been under such close scrutiny.
Mina Smallman went further still.
We need to drill down and get the rot out once and for all.
With particular criticism of Commissioner Cressida Dick, who she says has not contacted her family to apologise for the police's handling of the case. PCs Jaffa and Lewis are due to be sentenced in December. Sally Biddulph, ITV News.
MPs are calling for the suspension of new smart motorways over safety concerns. On a smart motorway, the hard shoulder is used as an extra lane, but the Transport Select Committee wants to pause the rollout of them after a number of fatal accidents, often where a broken-down vehicle is hit from behind. Dev Naran was 8 years old when he died after a lorry hit the car he was in on the M6. Sally Jacobs lost her husband Derek in 2019 after he was killed on a smart motorway. He was hit by another vehicle after he was forced to stop when his van broke down. Claire Mercer lost her husband Jason in 2019 on a section of the M1 without a hard shoulder. She has since campaigned to scrap smart motorways. She joins me now. Claire, you must be pleased with what this group of MPs is calling for.
Pleased is a bit of an overstatement. It's yet another group of people that agree that there's massive concerns with smart motorways, but with their platform and their power, they had the opportunity to be a lot stronger than they were. Previous Parliamentary Select Committee reports have been a lot stronger. They have actually outright said, do not do smart motorways. I mean, Highways England ignored them for years and years and years and did them anyway. So Highways England will have no problem at all in ignoring what has been suggested today, because that is all it is. It's more suggestions. There's no power to it. It's toothless, but it's just yet more people that agree with us that there's problems with smart motorways.
The Department of Transport has said in response to the Transport Select Committee report that this is a serious piece of work which we will engage with closely in the months ahead. Given what you've just said, do you think then that won't lead to any change? It won't lead to the pause in any new smart motorways?
Well, the fact that they've even said today, the day that it was released, they're going to take months. So they've already said that it's going to take months. There was 2 serious crashes in which people died at the junction where my husband was killed in the last 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, several people have been killed and several people have been injured, and that's just at one junction. So Highways England get this very hard-hitting, as they say, document today, and they've already straight off said they're going to take months to even look at it.
Claire, what is your advice for anyone who breaks down on a smart motorway, on a stretch of motorway around the country where there's no hard shoulder? The government says it's working to make them, I quote their words, not mine, as safe as possible. What do you do if you break down in that situation?
I have no advice to give because there is nothing you can do. Where my husband was, he couldn't get the vehicle out of the lane because of the crash barrier. He couldn't get over the crash barrier because there was a 30-foot drop. I mean, the official advice is either go left, so try and get into the first lane. But if it's not a hard shoulder, what does that do? And they don't say what to do if you can't go left. And if when absolutely pushed, the only advice they will give if you can't get off the road is to stay in your car and put your seatbelt on and brace for impact. And it will be a HGV because smaller vehicles can manoeuvre. These roads, and they know it, do not allow for physics. 40 tonnes travelling at 56 miles an hour cannot stop in the same distance as a Ford Fiesta. So it will be a truck that hits you. And that is their advice. And I would never give that advice. I would never say, sit there and wait to be injured. And that is the government's advice.
Claire Mercer, thanks once again for joining us on the programme. Thanks for your thoughts. Obviously, your campaign and fight goes on. Claire Mercer, thank you. MPs are being told to wear face masks, and tours of Parliament are being cancelled as COVID cases rise on the estate. The new rules also include social distancing, and chairs of meetings are being told to be stricter when ensuring compliance. And a new law which would ban wet wipes containing plastic has cleared its first hurdle in the House of Commons. The Labour MP Fleur Anderson is behind it. Next, the Health Secretary has admitted the government won't be able to meet its target of recruiting 6,000 new GPs. Sajid Javid was being questioned about the shortage of doctors in primary care by one of his predecessors at a session examining the NHS backlog. Our health editor, Emily Morgan, is here. Emily, what exactly did Mr Javid have to say then?
Well, he was giving evidence to the Health and Social Care Select Committee and was being pressed by its chair, Jeremy Hunt, about this target to increase the number of GPs by 6,000 by 2024. Now, this is a target that was set by Boris Johnson back in 2019, and the Health Secretary admitted that just 1,200 extra GPs had gone into general practice since that point, but he couldn't confirm whether they were full-time equivalent GPs, and that's really important. Jeremy Hunt pointed out that, in fact, figures suggest the number of full-time GPs had gone down since 2019. So he was asking Sajid Javid whether he would get this target back on track and if indeed he would even meet this target. And this is what he had to say.
No, we're not on track. I would like to see. I certainly am looking at what more we can do. We definitely do need to. I want to see that increase, but I'm not going to pretend that we're on track when clearly we're not.
Did he offer any solutions then?
Well, to an extent, yes. I mean, he was asked how he was going to solve this, and to that he said that it was about getting more students through training, about recruiting more international GPs, about listening to GPs' concerns on the ground. The key point here that this really is about retention, about keeping GPs currently working in their job. And on this, he said that he was going to try and support them more, ensure that extra funding was spent wisely, and ensure that GPs were happy in their jobs. The problem that he has, though, is that there are more GPs leaving the profession than there are coming into it. There are also many GPs going part-time, and it's just stopping that is the real challenge for the Health Secretary.
Emily Morgan, thank you. The former Chelsea boss, Antonio Conte, has been named as Tottenham's new manager until the summer of 2023. He's been out of work since leaving Inter Milan at the end of last summer. Nuno Espirito Santo, Tottenham's former manager, was sacked yesterday. And finally, let's return to the climate conference in Glasgow, where princes, politicians and some very clever people are trying to save the planet for humans to live on. The royals have been centre stage, among them Prince William. He's taken the 15 finalists of his new climate change competition, Earthshot, to the city. All the winners have come up with solutions to the climate change crisis. Our royal editor, Chris Shipp, is there. Chris, a big moment for them and for William's campaign.
Yes, I think after the Queen's powerful and personal video message that she delivered last night, and I'm told the world leaders listened in silence in Kelvin Grove Art Gallery as she spoke, the sort of royal work has now turned to her son, Prince Charles, and her grandson, Prince William. Prince Charles, for example, was talking about Indigenous people. He was at that forestry event that you've covered on the programme so far. Prince William, however, was talking about this Earthshot prize. Now, we told you about this a couple of weeks ago. It's a 10-year programme, £5 million prize money every year for each of those 10 years to try and find solutions, little solutions in different parts of the world to the climate crisis and the degradation of nature. And actually, it was at that event that we met one of those finalists. She's 15 years old. And in fact, Nina, this afternoon, she's got a speech just across the river from me here, which is the main stage there, where she will speak to the world leaders just ahead of Bill Gates, incidentally. Have a listen to Venetia, and I think you'll agree that she said, as the Queen said yesterday, the decisions being made here is about our children and our children's children.
I'm not only delivering a speech on my behalf, I'm delivering it on behalf of the world's youth, because I have the chance to speak at COP26. It's an international stage and I want to make the best of it.
For people who say, why should I listen to a 15-year-old girl? What's your answer?
Age never matters. Sometimes even a younger person can be really smart and really wise, and an older person not so much.
I think you'll agree, a very impressive 15-year-old who's already invented this solar-powered ironing cart in India. And to make this one bet, Nina, I don't think it's the last time that we will hear from Venetia Umashankar.
Yeah, well, I agree with that too, Chris. Thank you very much. That's all we've got time for this lunchtime. Mary will bring you the latest developments on the evening news at 6:30. From everyone here for now, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.